Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, I'm Thomas Hubert, digital editor at the Irish Farmers Journal. In the past week, we revealed plans by Larry Goodman's ABP to buy a 50% stake in Slaney Foods, which also includes Irish country meats. News editor Patrick Donohoe asked markets specialist Phelim O'Neill what the proposed deal means for the industry and for beef farmers.
Well, basically, we need to start by looking at how the Slaney Foods Group had been owned prior to this. Up until this point, Slaney Foods business was jointly owned by the Linden Food Group from Northern Ireland and the Allen family, who had been the previous total owners of Slaney going back to the early 1970s. About 15 years ago, the Linden Food Group and the Allen family formed a joint venture partnership of co-ownership of the Slaney Foods Group, the abattoir facility at Nguleka in County Wexford. Subsequent to that, the joint venture went on to purchase Irish Country Meats, the lamb processing facility at Camolan and Navan in County Meath, and sometime later then they acquired a processing and distribution business in Liège in Belgium. Now, recently, the Allen family decided that they wanted to withdraw from the business, and that is a portion of the business that ABP are proposing to acquire.
And a deal, again, should it be approved by the Competition Authority, would see ABP have up on 30% of the national beef kill, 40% of the sheep kill.
That's true. I suppose what's particularly interesting about this proposed deal is the fact that it's a partnership or a proposed partnership between ABP and the Linden Food Groups, with whom they're a very significant competitor in Northern Ireland. ABP have two beef processing abattoirs in the north, one sheep processing as well, and ABP have a fairly large cattle killing operation and sheep processing business as well. So they are very much in competition up north. In the south, ABP would have been a major competitor of Slaney Meats, particularly in the south and southeast of the country. And I suppose farmers are looking at this and somewhat concerned by the fact that there is another competitor that is likely to be gone from the scene, assuming this deal is approved.
Does this, and we spoke about this in the office this week, when you draw a line south of Tullamore and look southwards, outside of, and again, should this deal be approved by the Competition Authority, you'd have very little competition outside of the ABP group. You'd have Dawn's facility in Grana in Waterford, and you'd have Keepak's Watergrass Hill facility. Should there be any problems, or could there be any potential problems with regard to that competition in the sector?
There's no doubt that the cattle processing capability is very much confined to the companies that you've just referred to there, and farmers in that region, that is basically their choice, will be limited to those three options. And I suppose from a competition perspective, there's two sides to this. Farmers are regularly very concerned about what this might mean. Yet, I suppose if we look at it objectively, a meat factory at every crossroads isn't a guarantee of farmers getting the best price for their product. In fact, if we look at how the industry has evolved over the past decade or two, it's very much a case that the end buyers of meat have become concentrated in the major retail businesses, the major supermarkets, particularly in the UK, but also across Europe, and the major food service or burger chains such as the McDonald's and the Burger King outlets. So again, to have a processing industry that can engage with those on their terms, it needs to have substance and size about it. And I suppose if there is something or there's a positive, I think that is where we have to look in it, that we do need a strong processing industry. Now, the thing about our processing industry, they don't have the trust of the farming community and their farmer suppliers, and it very much falls to the processing industry to earn that trust. I
suppose the question is why, and you've answered the why for why ABP would buy this, but why would Slaney and Bert Allen want to get out of the business now?
Well, I suppose if you look at it, the Allen family has been involved in the business for the best part of 5 decades. They have considerable other business interests, and again, Bert Allen would be what would be seen as the public face of the business. It's well known that he would have other business interests in Germany, both in the renewable energy side and in the property. He is also, I suppose, in terms of national profile, he's very much eclipsed now by his family, with his sons achieving considerable success in the international international show jumping arena. Again, I believe they're German-based. So I suppose there's no particular surprise that the Allen family would choose to withdraw or retire from the red meat business. I think where the surprise does lie, however, is the fact that the Linden Food Group, whom I'm sure had the first opportunity or first refusal on it, didn't choose to take that up. And we can only speculate as to why they may have chosen not to, but I think for us, and for the red meat industry in Ireland, I think that actually gives us a great insight to the direction of travel of meat processing.
Will this lead Phelim to a full buyout by ABP of Linden Group? What's your understanding of that?
It would be very, very easy to speculate that might be the next phase or the next stage that will happen at some point in the future. The point that I was going to make is that meat processing is very much becoming concentrated. The end customers for beef, the best customers, tend to be the big supermarkets, the big burger chains, as we said. The reality is, to deal with those and engage with those on their terms and at their level, you need to have large businesses. Meat processing is a very low margin, high turnover business, and it's increasingly difficult for the smaller independent companies that would have previously built their trade very much on an export business to mainland Europe and had a wide profile of customers. The reality of life is the only show in town has been the UK market in recent years. France and Italy and indeed Germany, which had previously been the highest value markets in Europe, have ceased being for the past few years. And companies that would have built their business, and Linden Foods would have been one of those, that had built their business on the basis of their European business with limited customer base in the UK, would be finding it increasingly difficult to do business. I think that logic could be applied to a number of other independent companies in the country, by the way. So the fact that Linden chose not to take on the rest of the business, I think it tells us an awful lot about the direction of travel of the overall meat processing industry.
We've been hearing, I suppose, a lot over the last year and maybe 18 months about what the consumer wants and what the retailers want from a farmer point of view. Is this type of proposed acquisition by AFA or by ABP, is that another example of what the retailer wants and what the end consumer wants? It is that scale, it is that buying power, it is that processing power that essentially results on leading over to where, over 60% of our cattle end up when processed on the UK market.
Yeah, the reality is that the UK is our main export market, accounting for 50% or just over of our total production. And I think the thing about the retail business there, it pays just enough money to make sure that it is the number one attraction, the number one customer. And I think, I suppose, where the inequity or the unfairness really creeps into the business, the UK retail sector, they contribute virtually nothing to the category management. It's very much handed over to their processor supplier to manage the beef offering on the shelves of a supermarket. The processor takes all the risk. Of course, they pass that back to the farmer, and that's why we have huge price volatility. But the reality is the processor carries the risk of the business in store. The retailer does basically nothing other than provide the shelf space. But for that, they take up to half the margin. So there's a serious issue for me in the meat industry as to the share of the final sales price that makes its way to the retailer compared to the rest of the supply chain. And that is something, I suppose, in terms of looking at where the opportunity or where there might be a positive angle in this story, which of course is a major concern to farmers, where the positive angle might be is that it does give our processors the more rationalisation that happens, gives them the capability to engage with the big supermarkets more on their terms rather than be dictated to. As I say, the challenge now to the processing sector is, however, that they communicate this to a manner in which they build farmer confidence, because out there, farmers, Irish farmers, with the volatility that they have taken over the past 12 or 18 months in terms of farm gate beef prices and the hits they've taken along the way on specification and other matters, they have very little confidence in our processing sector. And I repeat, that's a confidence that has to be earned. It's one that cannot be given as of right.
Thanks very much, Phelim. You can read more about ABP's proposed deal with Slaney in this week's Irish Farmers Journal and on farmersjournal.ie.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Odile Evans has a detailed report in this week's Irish Farmers Journal about those young farmers who did the right thing and formed a partnership with their parents to organise the transfer of the family farm, but now find themselves excluded from support schemes. She discusses the situation with Derrie Dillon, who is in charge of agri affairs at Macra.
They were the pioneers of partnerships as such that came in the early 2000s, the new entrant milk production partnerships with their parents. there was no requirement for them to have a herd number in these arrangements, and they were really for family succession and to promote family succession. And they were never considered to be a young farmer because they didn't have activated a herd number, and therefore they weren't eligible for the likes of installation aid because they weren't deemed to be set up in farming. And now we have the new Common Agricultural Policy, and some of them still haven't got herd numbers, but when they activate a herd number, they're now not deemed as being set up from the date they activate the herd number. Instead, they're going back to when the group was originally formed. So the goalpost has changed for these young farmers, and now they're finding themselves that they actually have never been defined as a young farmer under either of the Common Agricultural Policies. And that's really that their issue is that they've never got the chance to be a young farmer.
So they've never qualified for any top-ups or on TAMs or anything like that, is what you're saying?
Yeah, because basically now they're outside the 5-year rule to be defined as a young farmer, because the criteria has changed. There's additional criteria on these young farmers. They're called group criteria because they're in a partnership. They're treated the same as if they were in a company, and it's from the date that structure was set up, as distinct from the date they activate the herd number. So if they activate a herd number in the morning, it's not from when they activated the herd number, it's from when originally the group was set up. So that's the anomaly there, and the difficulty is no one foresaw this, and we feel that there's a genuine case for these young farmers, because the advice at the time was that they didn't need a herd number, and now when they're getting a herd number, they're not defined as a young farmer.
So this isn't an issue necessarily just in Ireland. I mean, this is an issue that this case needs to be made by the Minister at European level.
Indeed, I suppose new entrant parent partnerships are a uniquely Irish construct. They're a form of a group, but really they're not like what European terms would call a group as a partnerships that might change your tax status, or a company that may change your ownership status. A new entrant parent partnership are neither of these. They're not really a group in terms of a European context, but Ireland need to make the case at European level that they are not actually a group as defined at European terms, that really these young farmers were never set up, and it's the date that they activate the herd number rather than the date that they went into the new entrant parent partnership. So it's a uniquely Irish thing, and we can look for a solution that they were never actually a group, and that would overcome the solution that when they activate the herd number then, or when they've gone on to the new register of partnerships, which is at the moment, that should could be the commencement date. Okay,
because this is a massive issue for young farmers that are caught up in this, because they're competing with other young farmers who are getting extra money for that, and they can't rent land. It's causing untold problems for them, isn't it?
It certainly is. They feel they're at a disadvantage because of the young farmer who stayed at home but never went onto a partnership arrangement and never went onto herd number. When they go onto herd number, they're getting the young farmer advantage. However, these young farmers that done the right thing at the time, went on into a partnership to help succession in the future, and that's what these arrangements were for, to encourage the transfer of land in the business over time, and that they were seen as a good model and the ideal model because we took it from the French system. But these are now being disadvantaged for going into this format, whereas the people that never went on a herd number but were still working away at home, now when they activate a herd number are getting the young farmer advantages and the young farmer schemes and being eligible for them. So that's the anomaly, and that's where they feel, because they went on the right structure and done the right thing, that now they're being disadvantaged for entering into partnerships in the early days.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Meanwhile, negotiations are continuing here in Paris to reach a global agreement on climate change by Friday. Various farmer organisations are represented at the COP21 conference, and I talked to Harold Kingstong, the IFA's Environment Chairman, about the implications of the current talks for farmers. Harold, there's this conference, but today, this Thursday, is also the day when the climate law comes into force in Ireland. And then we're hearing about a lot of EU work to be done on that next year. What are the connections between all those levels of negotiations and legislation?
Yeah, it's a very complicated system, all right, but I think it's going to work out. Basically, what's happening in Ireland today is the legislation on the climate bill is finally being passed through the Dáil. It's been a long process, but that is going to be the enabling legislation to allow various other plans to happen. We've been working away on how we deal with agriculture, how we deal with different areas within the climate context in Ireland. All the various government departments have been working away, but this actually brings it all together, and it'll put a bit more focus on it. But this is basically the enabling legislation. In terms of here in Paris, the big thing is actually trying to bring all the various countries together. And if you try to think about bringing people in a school or people in a GA club or whatever together to try and make agreements, there's always going to be difficulties. But I think that's the big thing that's happening here in Paris, is that all the countries are willing to participate. The COP is the conference of the parties, and that's what is being achieved, the big thing that is being achieved here in Paris. Following on from the directions that this will form, we then have to actually bring it back to implementation in the European context, because Europe will be making their pledges as to what their direction will be for the next number of years on climate, and that has to come back then to decide how that's going to be implemented within Europe. The climate bill itself in Ireland will have nothing really to do with that. That is just purely putting it into a legal status in Ireland. Not every country is actually putting it into legislation.
Now, from the farmers' perspective, as an IFA representative, how do you view these three processes coming together? What's satisfactory and what is worrying from your point of view at the moment?
I'm actually not overly worried in a way, because I think the realisation of what we've been saying in IFA all along is coming to pass now with a global context, because there's a realisation that food and food production and land use are sectors that cannot be dealt with as a fossil fuel industry can be dealt with, where you can just simply talk about direct cuts in emissions on fossil fuels. It's a bit more complicated, and it's just a totally different sector when you're dealing with the food production. And I think Ireland, as a leader, because of what we're doing in Origin Green, for instance, with the measurements on farm, that measurement process allows us to know where we stand. It allows us to then see how we can improve on it. And that knowledge is something that we can also export and also help to improve. It's not just about transferring funds into climate change development in developing countries. It's actually about promoting the knowledge there. And one of the things that's being talked about is the knowledge per hectare, which it's a very valuable concept when you think about it. When people talk about the value of a hectare of ground in food production, you also have to look at, you need to understand what the field is about. As a farmer, you need to know how good that field is at producing the crop you want to plant in it, what the problems are with it, what the good points are, the fertility of it, and then having the technical knowledge that we get from the likes of Teagasc to explain how you deal with that afterwards. So this knowledge per hectare is certainly one of the ways that I see progress being made.
How are farmers and these kind of proposals that you're mentioning there being received, for example, here in Paris at the moment?
When you listen to commentators back home, you'd think actually it's totally disjointed, but the reality is very different here, where every morning the World Farmers Organization have a briefing, and most people coming together realise that while it may be different in every country and dealing with the issues will be different in every country, it certainly isn't a one-size-fits-all, but we're all farmers and we're all producing food and we're all trying to make a living, and we're all willing to, on two sides, recognise the difficulty with climate change and what that's doing to food production capacity in a lot of countries, but also recognising that as farmers we have the capacity to do something about climate change. So by improving our foods production efficiency, we can reduce emissions. By improving the organic matter level of our soils, we can improve the carbon storage of those soils. By focusing on proper tillage methods, by using fertiliser responsibly. There's a lot of things we can do and have been doing, and in some cases have been doing without realising the fact that it was actually going to be a benefit as well. So we're already working on this and willing to contribute. As such, we need to make sure then that is recognised in the text here, and that's the big push that we have, is to make sure that food is included in the text and land use is included in the text as well.
Okay, Harold, thank you very much. I also met Evelyn Nguleka, the president of the World Farmers Organization.
I'm a small-scale farmer in Zambia, Africa. I represent two farmer organizations. One is a national one, which is the Zambia National Farmers Union. I am the president. Secondly is the World Farmers Organization, which is an organization of farmer organizations all over the world. We have more than 70 members, dotted from about 50 countries so far, and we are of course looking for more members to be able to voice out and be able to speak on behalf of our members. Our main mandate is really to influence policy that affect agriculture, to be able to shape agriculture so that the people who are producing the food also have a decent livelihood out of what they do.
And of course, our listeners in Ireland would know the Irish Farmers Association as a member of the WFO. Now, you're here in Paris for the COP21 climate conference. What do you expect from this event? What do you think farmers can get out of this, and how can they participate in what's happening here?
Our ambition is to be able to get a very ambitious deal, a binding deal on the negotiations that are going on, and for us that would be very important. I think the details and importance of each and every sector can be dealt with later, but a deal must be struck. Then we can be able, for Marrakesh, to be able to go into the details. I think the starting point should be, let us have the deal.
So the deal is the world's nations agree to keep, say, climate change under 2 degrees. What does that mean for farmers? What can farmers do without putting food production at risk to achieve that?
The deal should be that agriculture is part of the solution, and it should be included in the discussions. Secondly, the reduction of the temperature is critical, but for us at the moment, it is not specifically at what degree, but what is important is that we get an agreement and an understanding that this needs to be done now, because we believe that we are the people who are on the ground, and if we get the deal, we will make sure that we get, whether it is 1.5 or 2 degrees, that can be achieved. But then what needs to be done is we need a binding. That is the key word. It has to be binding. People have to realize that this needs to be done, and it needs to be done now.
So if there is a binding agreement, does that mean we're going to ask farmers to take part, and we're going to need to give them support as well? How can the leaders who are deciding here relate to the farmers on the ground with this deal?
To start with, I think it is interesting to know that there is a fund set aside. Unfortunately, we are not seeing much movement on the contribution on the funds going into those coffers, because people are not ready to commit long term yet. But that would be necessary, because I think for adaptation and for mitigation, finances will need to be done.
Is there a connection between the smallholder farmer in Africa like yourself and, for example, the exporting dairy farmer in Ireland in terms of the way we look at climate change? Are we all farmers in the same situation in relation to this issue?
Every farmer all over the world is feeling the impact of climate change. And therefore, when we speak as farmers, we speak as one voice. The impact will be different depending on where you are, what kind of agriculture you do, and we all believe that something needs to be done to save ourselves and to save the next generation.
Okay, Dr. Nguleka, thank you very much.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Now, let's hear from one of our farmer writers. Brian Nicholson is a sheep farmer in County Kilkenny, and he's experimenting with a number of new things at the moment, from AI to resuming tillage after many years without growing crops.
I'm farming in North Kilkenny, Johnstown. We have approximately 105 hectares, 13 acres of barley, and the remainder then is grassland. There's 1,100 breeding ewes on the farm, and this year we AI'd 500 for Sheep Ireland for CPT programme. There's probably, at the moment, I'd say about 81% of the ewes from the AI have held. We'll know better when we scan after Christmas.
Yeah, we reported in this AI operation in the Farmers Journal and at farmersjournal.ie with a video that people can watch, and it's quite impressive as a procedure, but quite new as well. Many people wouldn't be familiar with it. So are you happy with the test so far?
Yeah, so far. I mean, it's still very new to me. It's only my second year involved in the programme. This year we doubled the numbers of ewes involved in the programme, so we'll really find out how things go in the spring when we're lambing down. We can probably expect for 500 ewes to lamb down in 10 days in the spring, so it'll be a busy period.
Why did you choose to take part in this programme? What's the advantage for you?
Part of the advantage to me was to improve the genetic profile of my ewe flock without having to buy in a large quantity of rams. Sheep Ireland select the top 5-star rams available to them and inseminate a portion of ewes from each ram. So there's a larger selection of genetics being used than if I'd purchased an individual ram and let them out with the ewes.
And then how do you pair those selected rams for AI for a certain type of ewe?
All the rams are used in conjunction with breeds. So Sheep Ireland are staying within my own breed policy with a few variations. There's mainly Belclare on Texel and Texel on Belclare, and there's Suffolk being used then as well. So there are a few Belclare matings to get linkage, and vice versa, some Texel matings to get linkage between the different breeds. I hope to improve on my production from a grass-based system by getting the good genetics into the flock.
And you also have the tillage side of things. How are you looking at this going forward? How are you developing that part of the farm?
Yeah, the tillage is something I've got back into after a number of years out. What I'm using it to do is increase the stocking rate on the grassland in the farm by increasing the amount of tillage. The straw from the crops will be used for winter bedding, and then I will be putting in forage crops after the main harvest is taken off to outwinter stock for longer into the year. Just trying to kind of work around and see if I can minimise the amount of time that I can keep sheep in the shed, because I think the longer I can keep them out, the cheaper it will be for me in the long run.
And how does that work out in terms of costs? Do you do any of the tillage yourself? Do you bring in contractors?
Yeah, I'd get all contractors to do the tillage work for me. I wouldn't have any of the machinery on site, so it wouldn't be the most economical way of doing things, but still I'd be getting 2 crops out of a field in a year. So this year with the bumper harvest, and I had seed barley, which had an additional bonus on top of that. The tillage enterprise left more money than I was expecting, and then I have the savings on housing. I don't have to keep ewes in the house as long for the year then as well.
Is the harvested crop all sold, or do you use any for your own feed?
All the grain is sold. It's contracted. It's seed barley, so it's first germination there. It goes into the seed breeders. Inspected by the department and that, so the seed barley goes in after a lay field, so it's a nice way of getting an extra few pound on your barley, because if you can get to pass as seed, it's a bit more beneficial than just feeding barley.
So breeding on both sides, sheep and grain. You're very much into breeding.
Yeah, something like that. I wouldn't be big on the breeding and the tillage end of it, but it's just a system that I've started to reintroduce back onto the farm.
Okay, Brian, thank you very much, and good luck with all that and the changes and the experiments on your farm.
Thank you.
And you can read all about Brian's farm at farmersjournal.ie in the farmer rights section regularly. Thank you.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Finally, Irish Country Living's features editor, Maria Moynihan, talks to the turkey farmer interviewed in this week's magazine and asks him about his farm and his secret roasting tips.
I'm here with Ronan, aka the Friendly Farmer, just in the lead up to Christmas. So how are you keeping, Ronan?
How are you, Maria?
Very good. What's life like here at the moment?
Just about have time to talk to you. We're flat out here at the moment, but flat out in a good way. It's the lead up to Christmas. We've just started processing the birds, and I'm just in for a quick cup of tea, and the lads are having their tea, and we're at geese today. Would you believe we're dry plucking the geese, and it's the busiest time of the year. It's a great time of the year. It's the time we get to maybe 6 months hard work, all kind of culminates in about 2 weeks. We get to process our birds, we get to meet all our customers, and hopefully, touch wood, all things going well, we get to pay our bills and then sit down and relax for a week or two and start the process all over again. So you've caught us at a busy time.
Absolutely, and thank you for taking time as well.
Not at all.
So you've been mother hen since June?
Yes, June for the turkeys, and then the chickens are kind of every week. So, but June for the turkeys, we've been looking after them with the Norfolk bronze turkeys. I kind of describe them like the Angus of turkeys. There's a little bit more marbling in the meat. Lovely succulent birds. We do the geese then, and we do the ducks, and we process maybe about 1,000 odd for ourselves between them all. And then we're processing for other farmers this year, give them a dig out. So there's a few people in the area starting to raise turkeys, which is great. And we're in the thick of it now.
And how many families roughly will you feed this Christmas?
I sat down one ages ago and worked it out. Maybe 1,300, or 12, 1,300.
Okay, respectable enough. So the pressure is on.
The pressure is on, but it's our 8th Christmas, so we're getting a little bit more used to it. But it is a pressurised time. But we're lucky with great customers, and they support us every year. Okay,
so as the turkey insider, of course, there's a big debate every year how to get that perfect turkey. So what are your tips for cooking it?
Get your mother or mother-in-law to cook it.
That's
and
very
then it
good
will
start,
definitely be perfect. I know. We advise people to cook the bird breast down in a oven at 180 degrees. Start it off at maybe 120, 200, then reduce it down to 180 degrees and cook it for 20 minutes per pound. Breast down, no tin foil over it, in a non-fan assisted oven. And then half an hour before it's ready, work out your cooking times. Actually, if you go to just Google the Friendly Farmer, you'll get all the cooking times. We stick it up, we have it up on the website this time of the year. And before you're finished, just turn it over for half an hour and it'll brown off. And why you cook it breast down is all the marbling and we'll say the lovely juicy fat bits of the turkey are in the back of the turkey, and that trickles down into the breast of the turkey. And when you turn it around, and make sure when you take it out of the oven, make sure you let it sit for half an hour to 45 minutes minimum. Cover it in tin foil, cover it in towels, plenty of towels, and walk away from it. And I guarantee you, when you do the first carve into that bird, that the juices will just trickle down on the knife and it'll be absolutely fantastic.
There'll be no complaints.
No complaints.
So your tradition is
once it's an Irish bird.
Once it's Irish, you don't go for the orange or you just keep it
Why
simple.
make a difficult day sometimes more difficult? Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Perfect.
Plenty of salt and pepper on its back when you're cooking it, and you don't need anything else.
There, you're sorted. Okay, that's it. Now, we'll let you back to your busy schedule, and thank you very much.
Do you want a bit more tea, or are you alright?
I do, yeah, and I'll take a turkey in the car.
Lovely stuff.
Thanks,
alright,
Ronan.
thank you.
Bye.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.